Hey guys, what's up? It's me, Thomas. Today we're back here with Extra History. Today, well, we're back here for part 2 of the Buddhist Expansion with Serial Killer Monk. Of course, I mean, every religion's gonna have an extremist, and I guess this guy was the top of the top. Not sure how well this went, but I'm guessing since Buddhism nowadays doesn't have many, extremists, probably not well. So let's see what this monk did, huh? So be sure to like, subscribe for more. Hope you enjoy. Let's go.
Northern India, 6th century BCE. The wild man Angulimala tears through the jungle panting, a necklace of human fingers dangling from his neck. He's killed 999 people, ambushing them on the road and dragging them from houses, taking a finger from each. And he just sighted his 1000th victim, an old monk. Yet no matter how hard he runs, he can't catch him.
"How are you so fast, old man?"
He shrieks.
"I want your fingers. Stop! I must have your fingers."
I have stopped, the monk replies. And as impossible as it may seem, it's true. The monk stands immobile, yet as Angulimala runs, the land stretches between them. I've stopped the cycle of death and rebirth. Now you, Angulimala, why don't you stop? Humbled by this display of power and wisdom, Angulimala drops to his knees, presses his blood-stained hands together, and begs Buddha to take him as a student.
Damn. 999. God damn.
Thanks so much to HelloFresh for continuing to help us bring history to the table. Now, you may have noticed in the first episode of this series, when we talked about how Buddha attained his awakening and discovered the Four Noble Truths, we included a few more gods and demons than in, say, our John Brown series. Well, that was a deliberate choice. See, we don't have many historical sources for Buddha's life, and actually, Buddhism isn't that interested in the historical Buddha. What's important to them is the meanings of these stories, rather than strict factuality. As a result, historians look at early Buddhism through the lens of oral history, analyzing these stories to extrapolate what the early Buddhist community looked like. Who joined? Why did they do so? And what made Buddhism attractive? Because it seemed to be very attractive. Within 45 years, Buddha would go from 10 close followers to a faith community of thousands. So why? I mean, that's the question that's at the heart of every academic history of a religious movement, right? Why did the Buddha's message appeal to people, spread, and endure when thousands of competing ideas died out? Buddhism, after all, did not arise in a land devoid of religious tradition. On the contrary, it was rich with them. Brahmanism, a historical religion that was a precursor to Hinduism, dominated the cradle of Buddhism. Not to mention that concepts such as reincarnation, the cycle of death and rebirth, and fulfilling your dharma, or righteously living out your societal role in castes, whether it be a soldier or laborer, etc., were already well established. And much of Buddhism would be an attempt to critique, evolve, or react against these concepts. Well, Brahmanism was weakening because it wasn't that spiritually fulfilling, a fact we suspect due to a large number of splinter groups arising at the time, from Buddhism to Jainism to ancient Hinduism and others that died out, most of which that appear to address an anxiety over reincarnation. But you might be thinking at this point, wait, why would people want to exit the cycle of death and rebirth? Living infinite lives sounds pretty great. Okay, but on the other hand, does it though? Think of it this way. Would you want to experience all of the highs and lows of life all over again forever? Sounds kind of exhausting to me. And also, it's important to remember that this was a time before modern medicine, where childbirth, aging, and sickness were extremely painful and dangerous. In fact, it was more normal to be sick than it was to be well. The mortality rate was high for children and women, and political instability spurred regular warfare. Oh, and then there's hell. Wait, did we not mention hell before? Because between each rebirth, you would be pitched into the realm of Yama, god of the underworld, and hellaciously tortured to burn off bad karma. Sidebar, this guy is Yama. Yeah, he's kind of a boss. So, with all of that said, you sure you still want to keep riding this cosmic Ferris wheel forever? But even outside wanting to become a monk and attain nirvana in this life, Buddhism still held appeal for the lay people as well. They were encouraged to meditate, to moderate their behavior, live by ethical codes, and maintain love for their family and community. Monks also worked in said communities as counselors, spiritual advisors, and teachers. In other words, Buddhist practice held immediate benefits in improving relationships and fostering an outlook ideal for coping with an ever-changing and sometimes chaotic world. After all, if every...
Actually, that does make sense, and well, if you think about it, their practices actually are, standard even today, since a lot of people recommend, take some time to meditate and deep breaths, and you can actually say, you could thank Buddhism for bringing that to mainstream. or at least the main stage, since, you know, they promise, you know, if you attain nirvana in your life, you'll be fine, or something like that. Remember, the others could provide needs that, you know, hey, no worries, you'll get better in the next life. But here, it's definitely more like a here and now situation, you know? Which makes a lot of sense, because why wait for the next life where you could constantly get worse, where you could try to make things better here, right? Anyway.
Everything isn't permanent. Negative things and troubles will also pass. And the religions that last are the ones that do these things, that use ritual, moral, and theological codes to benefit the individual practitioners as well as their communities. And that community aspect was strong in Buddhism, since monks also worked as counselors, spiritual advisors, and teachers in their communities. This was by design, by the way. Buddha wanted to specifically tie the monks and lay people together. In fact, Buddhism is a religion dependent on urbanization, because you see, monks had many prohibitions. They couldn't harm sentient creatures, eat meat, or sleep in a soft bed, but most crucially, they couldn't handle money. Meaning without cities and towns, monks simply couldn't operate. Each morning, monks would go into the community with begging bowls. Then the community would donate food to them as a way to support their religious mission. And when the monk's bowl was filled, he would return and eat it all as his only meal. And this act engaged the lay people in the upkeep of their religious community. Of course, some gave more, such as wealthy converts donating pieces of property for monks to use, thereby founding the first monasteries. Now, these donations helped worshippers build karmic merit, but they also mirrored Buddha's renunciation of worldly things and trappings. But then, for people who wanted to gain enlightenment as soon as possible, that very renunciation could also mean renouncing life and becoming a monk. And doing so, while difficult, could have great rewards, especially for people who needed a total change, like the finger-collecting serial killer that we talked about in the beginning of this episode. Buddha's conversion of Angulimala demonstrates Buddhism's promise of redemption. Not only did Angulimala reform, the stories claim that that reformation was so total that he became spiritually reborn, attained nirvana, and worked miracles. In fact, Buddha himself declared that Angulimala, upon his death, had exited the cycle. It's a story that emphasized that not only can anyone redeem themselves in Buddhist belief, but that the eternally changing nature of the world offers hope. For if all is passing, then even someone in a state of what might be called evil can become good. Interestingly though, the story is a bit more complicated. One morning, when Angulimala went out to beg for food, several of his victims' family members broke his bowl and beat him. Then when he asked the Buddha why this was allowed, even though he was spiritually reborn, Buddha informed him that even though he'd repented, the harm of his violence could not be undone, nor the karmic consequences. That's a surprisingly modern idea of reconciliation. In Angulimala, we also see a man seeking out Buddhism as a way to atone for violence, and perhaps some other early adherents were doing the same. Because as we'll see later, when we discuss Chinese Buddhism and Kung Fu, this religion will come to hold a special appeal for former soldiers. Others were likely attracted to Buddhism's egalitarianism. For instance, among Buddha's inner circle was Umpali, a poor barber who Buddha ordained as a monk alongside princes, showing the movement's rejection of the caste system. Buddha also permitted an order of nuns, though in truth only after his aunt hounded him to do so for 5 years. However, he insisted that nuns follow even more rules and would rank lower than the lowliest monk. Women, he believed, belonged with families and were too emotional to excel in monastic life. Despite this somewhat insulting inclusion, Buddhist nuns would go on to use even this restrictive role to exercise power and influence. For 45 years, Buddha lectured and built his community, and by the time he was old and suffering from back pain, he had thousands of followers divvied into 6 schools. Supposedly, his cousin had even briefly founded a breakaway group. But then, one fateful day, he ate a meal donated to him, got sick, and died in meditation, passing into parinirvana. Which is a pretty low-key way to go by the standard of religious founders' deaths, if you think about it. Usually they're executed for their beliefs, or they ascend directly to heaven or something. He left instructions for his body to be cremated, with his mortal remains built into a mound known as a stupa. But while his wishes were clear, his sudden absence presented a problem. During his life, the Buddha had spread his message orally, which was fine when he was available to settle disputes or clarify his ideas. But with him now gone, the community realized they needed to commit his message onto paper, lest it be lost in a game of telephone. It's said that they called for a conference of all 6 schools. There, Buddha's personal attendant, Ananda, who had a flawless memory, told episodes of the Buddha's life and recalled his teachings. Meanwhile, the former barber Upali, who had memorized all of the rules of monastic life, recited them so they could be recorded. And these formed the first written doctrines of the Buddhist spiritual movement. Also, this was only, at least by tradition, the first of these conferences. A second would come about a century after Buddha's death. Though, by that time, Buddhism had split into 18 different schools, including one, Theravada, which still exists today. Yet an even greater split was coming. One that would help Buddhism spread across Asia, and its key figure would not be a monk, but a king, Ashoka the Great. And speaking of...
I'll have to check out Ashoka then, but anyway, I think that's about it for there. So thanks for watching, everybody. Let me know what you guys think of this one, which, I gotta admit, like, the fact that the Buddha said that this killer who killed 999 people was able to escape, like, jeez. That is a big appeal. Like, if he could do it, why can't I? Definitely really brings into, like, the appeal of Buddhism. Like, anyone could do it, you know? Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Let me know what you guys think. See ya.